week, the state Supreme Court will hear the appeals of convicted double murderer Alec Murdaugh. The defense plans to argue jury tampering by former Colleton County Clerk of Court Becky Hill, something she denies. Midland's attorney Brian Shealy is not directly connected to the case, but he's sharing his knowledge with News 19's Erica Glover, who's taking a closer look at the appeals process.
Going from a criminal conviction to a Supreme Court hearing involves a step-by-step appeals process. It is not a new trial. Instead, it's a review of whether consequential legal missteps occurred during initial proceedings. And after formal notice of an appeal, there are then submitted documents. That's where this more than 100-page brief comes into play. Ultimately, though, the full panel of justices on the South Carolina Supreme Court, they will make the final ruling. Going from a criminal conviction to a Supreme Court hearing involves a step-by-step appeals process. It is not a new trial. Instead, it's a review of whether consequential legal missteps occurred during initial proceedings. And after formal notice of an appeal, there are then submitted documents. That's where this more than 100-page brief comes into play. Ultimately, though, the full panel of justices on the South Carolina Supreme Court, they will make the final ruling.
So I think they have to give a new trial.
For the murder of Paul Murdaugh, whom you probably loved so much, I sentence you to prison for murdering him for the rest of your natural life.
On March 2nd, 2023, a jury found 56-year-old Alec Murdaugh guilty of murdering his wife Maggie and son Paul at their Colleton County home. He was given 2 life sentences with no possibility of parole.
I respect this court, but I'm innocent. I would never, under any circumstances, hurt my wife Maggie, and I would never, under any circumstances, hurt my son Paul.
Well, and it might not have been you. It might have been the monster you become when you take 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 opioid pills. Maybe you become another person.
But Murdaugh's attorneys believe former Colleton County Clerk of Court Becky Hill influenced the jury, something Hill has repeatedly denied. Listen now to Midland's attorney Brian Shealy share his appeals process knowledge.
In my opinion, the Supreme Court has a real interesting major issue in their case because the testimony from the witnesses at the motion for a new trial based on jury tampering was that Becky Hill was saying things like, don't believe Alec Murdaugh when he takes the stand, don't be fooled by defense tactics. I mean, anything like that ever happened in my jury, and I was aware of it, I'd be instantly seeking a new trial. You want both sides, the state and the defense, want just an unbiased ecosystem back there, so to speak.
In January of 2024, Alec Murdaugh was back in court seeking a new trial.
In light of what you said in the affidavit, which is I had questions about Mr. Murdaugh's guilt but voted guilty because I felt pressured by the other jurors. Is that answer that I just read a more accurate statement of how you felt?
Former South Carolina Supreme Court Chief Justice Jean Toll presided over those, ruling against arguments on whether he should be granted a new trial. That's because after a day-long hearing that January, Justice Toll denied Murdaugh's request for a new trial, ruling that while there were, quote, fleeting and foolish comments made by former Clerk of Court Becky Hill, they did not directly influence the jury's verdict. Fast forward to December 10th of 2024. That's when attorneys for Alec Murdaugh filed this 132-page brief with the South Carolina Supreme Court, appealing his conviction of killing his wife and son. 1 year later, December 2025, former Colleton County Clerk of Court Becky Hill pled guilty to obstruction of justice, perjury, and misconduct in office. Hill was sentenced to probation. She admitted to showing sealed Murdaugh trial exhibits to a photographer and lying about it in court. Hill's guilty pleas had nothing to do with jury tampering.
If I were the defense counsel, I'd be saying, when we briefed this initially, Becky Hill was not even criminally charged. Now she's been charged and pled guilty. And I don't see how this Supreme Court would possibly be able to overlook that and not give a new trial. Again, it's no one's fault. It's no one's fault. This is a bizarre outlier.
And that was Erica Glover reporting. Now, Murdaugh's appeals will be argued before the South Carolina Supreme Court a week from tomorrow, 9:30 on the morning of Wednesday, February 11th. And News 19 will have you covered from start to finish. Starting at 7 that morning on WLTX Plus, criminal defense experts will be live in studio and throughout the day and night, breaking down all the key components inside the